We welcome you back to the Michael Garfield radio program, heard all across the world here on the iHeartRadio stations. We do thank you for tuning in. It's the middle of summer. Obviously, there's not a lot of technology, other things going around. It's all sports all the time. Listen, if you're a longtime listener of mine, 25 years in the show, I talk about any darn thing I want to. You know, sports is my number one love. Alas, couldn't get a job directly in sports, and so I'm on the periphery. This is an interesting time of life for us, certainly time of year for sports. If you're not a baseball fan, not much going on. Football season's around the corner, but I'm in the sports mode because I actually just read a book. And that alone, the fact that I read a book is breaking news because, you know, I'm not the biggest reader, but it was a really, really interesting book that taught me, and I learned more about the history of my absolute favorite network in the history of the world. You absolutely know it's ESPN. I tell people I watch, TV probably 14 hours a day, 13 and a half hours of those probably on ESPN. That is all I watch. I've grown up with it. And to be able to kind of read the history of how it started was amazing. A book just recently was released, and it's called Sports Heaven, The Birth of ESPN. And it was co-written by two gentlemen, one of which is a name I'm very familiar with because I am the unofficial historian of ESPN. I actually know the name of the official historian of ESPN. His name is Mike Soltys. He has been with ESPN well over 40 years. Started out obviously as an intern and then worked in their PR department and now helps with the history of the network and now is a co-author of the book. I got a lot out from it and I wanted to talk to him and ask him a few questions. So we are joined by the official historian himself, Mike Soltys. Mike, I'll start with this. How many times have people come up to you and say, "You, sir, have the greatest career and job in the world"?
I actually just got it recently from an employee at ESPN. Said, "Boy, you get to live in all these glory days and not deal with current issues." So, yeah, I got a good job. Being the unofficial historian is pretty cool for you too, Michael.
Listen, unofficially, sadly, I don't get paid for it because I have spent my life literally learning media. I mean, that was my major in college, but even learning how to do things, almost from the nascent days of, when ESPN went on the air, and even the technologically advancements, which I think it really played a lot in the book, thanks to satellite. I mean, I really didn't realize the key role that satellite had of launching that network. But watching the front facing, idols of mine, going back to Chris Berman to the current crop that you have, I've learned a lot. But you were there almost in those early days, and it all started with a father-son duo. It was Bill Rasmussen, it was Scott Rasmussen, and it was an idea, and that's what the book is about. Give us the idea for the book and why so much, even get kind of a play-by-play from Bill himself.
Yeah, Bill is still with us, 93 years old, lives in Florida, battling Parkinson's every day, but he was strong enough for us to interview him for a documentary that we did with the same name, and then also work with us on this book. It came from a diary that Bill kept in 1978 and 79 on what was going on. It's a remarkable story. He's just a regular guy, gets fired, says, "What do I do next?" Has this, at the time, crazy idea of doing 24-hour-a-day sports. People today are like, why that? Why is that a crazy idea? Well, back then, you got your weekend sports and you got your 3 minutes in your local newscast before you went to bed, and you get your newspaper, and that would be it. And Bill felt there was space for that much more. And you mentioned the satellite. The satellite timing became critical to it all because that was the way to distribute it. His original idea was he was going to show UConn, and this is pre-Big East UConn, pre-national championships. He was going to show UConn to the state of Connecticut. And then a RCA salesman opened his eyes to the idea, well, if you want to send it to Connecticut, you can send it nationwide. And then it was like, well, we're going to send it nationwide. Where are we going with this? And he and his son came up with the idea of 24-hour-a-day sports.
And there it is. I mean, it really was a crazy idea back then. I mean, I remember the early days I studied in college of how cable worked. It was it was interesting. There was broadcast over the air, which there still is, but I think it was in the hills of Pennsylvania. Nobody could get a signal, and there was an antenna, and it went down. But it was that satellite that really launched everything. And now obviously, if you're of age, the history of how MTV started and how that got so big. And, I look at ESPN and I look at MTV, and I say this is because I'm a child of the 80s. I mean, those were brands that not only changed the industry that they covered, say sports and music, it changed our culture, if I
Right.
can go that way, Mike. Do you agree with that?
Oh, yeah, no, I absolutely agree with it. And the satellite, ESPN went first, but CNN and MTV then quickly followed. And each with the novel idea, well, there's a lot of people who want to know the news. It's Ted Turner, CNN, and then music is huge. Okay, MTV. And it was because of the satellite distribution. And they totally changed. It used to be you had three broadcast networks. This was before Fox had launched. And you chose between the three things they decided they wanted to show you. And that was your option from watching television. And people loved it. I mean, you got giant audiences for those three networks, but it wasn't giving people what they wanted when they wanted. And the satellite afforded that. And it did change everything. The viewership became gigantic for cable, everybody with their own niche. And ESPN got in at the right time with sports and became the brand name for sports that, it still exists to this day.
Speaking with Mike Soltys, he is the co-author of a book called Sports Heaven, The Birth of ESPN. Actually, it's the kind of subtitle here. It's almost, if not the greatest sports entrepreneurship success story. And I follow entrepreneurships. We look at owners of sports. And obviously, I'm down here in Texas, and I'm a big Jerry Jones fan, an absolute entrepreneur. But
Right.
you look at what Bill and his son Scott did with just an idea. I mean, all Jerry did was find money, and he bought a franchise. What Bill did, he really started something.
Right, right. I mean, Jerry, tremendous what he's done with the Cowboys. He came in with some oil dollars. Bill comes in with being fired, borrows money, borrows off his credit card, uses his son's money, goes to dad, goes to his sister, goes to his brother, burn through all that money, and then goes to a venture capital company that keeps him afloat for a while. But then fortunately, he got connected with Getty Oil Company. So the oil industry comes in. And the oil industry, the crisis in the 70s, where there was an oil crisis, led to Getty Oil being, we need to diversify. And they invested in all sorts of strange things, from lumbering to Broadway plays to real estate. And they were there at the right time to give the tens of millions of dollars. But Bill was just a regular guy in central Connecticut with an idea, but the idea required tens of millions of dollars. And ultimately, that's Getty gave him the money, but also gave him the hammer. And it was like, goodbye, Scott, goodbye, early investors, and ultimately goodbye, Bill. I mean, that is kind of the entrepreneur story. You need the money. Once you do the deal with the devil, you're getting the money, but you've given up control. And Bill did the amazing thing of getting ESPN off the ground, but then was quickly pushed out.
Yeah, you're speaking to the choir of my audience right now when it comes to the oil industry down here in Texas. We know
Right.
there's highs and lows, and it makes sense why Getty Oil was
Well,
built
Getty
first.
and your Texas audience would appreciate it. Getty, the Getty executive used to say, we dig dry holes and we move on. We're investing in ESPN. If you don't make it work, you're a dry hole and we move on. And there were very few companies that could approach that were willing to put in the tens of millions of dollars, and Getty Oil did that.
You think about nowadays, Mike, when it comes to launching, and I'm going to say networks, but I'll go to brands, I'll go to channels, and I'll go to content. Right now, here as we speak in 2026, it's simple. You can start a podcast with a computer and a microphone, and almost
Right.
every athlete has their own podcast, and it could be viewed and seen all around the world. Not so in 1979 or
No.
so. What can you recall when going back to Bill Rasmussen and his son? What were some of the major hurdles? You talked about, funding and things like that, but in the satellite. But what are the things that you spotlight in the book?
Well, you had a hard time getting people to believe in the concept. So you needed cable systems to believe in the concept, because there were cable that was doing what you described, basically putting together local television, and HBO existed at that time. Advertisers, and he was fortunate that he did a deal with Budweiser, which was the perfect match for sports. And then you need 24 hours a day of programming. Is a lot of programming. And he did a deal with the NCAA. All sorts of NCAA events existed that weren't being televised, including a good chunk of the NCAA men's basketball tournament. And he went to the NCAA and said, "Yeah, we'll do everything. We'll do Division II. We'll do your soccer championship." And it was that kind of approach that allowed him to get all this programming. But before he had the deal and before ESPN launches, he goes to Anheuser-Busch and says, "Yeah, I got Getty Oil." And he goes to Getty Oil and he says, "Yeah, I got NCAA." He doesn't have any of these, but he plays them all off each other. And miraculously, it's absolutely astounding that in a very brief period of time, he gets deals with all of them, and he gets a deal with the founding fathers of Bristol, Connecticut, to put the headquarters here, and right on down, he did everything that he needed to do to successfully launch it in a pretty quick, from the time he's fired by the Whalers to the time ESPN is on the air, with the first night being Sports Center, which was Bill's concept. That's less than a year and a half. And he pulled that off without the financial resources, just with the positive attitude and the belief in the idea that sports 24 hours a day would work.
Talking with Mike Soltys. He is the co-author of a book called Sports Heaven, The Birth of ESPN. I like the way the angle that you and Garrett wrote the book. It's specifically, there's a timeline counting up to the days. Saturday, September 16th, the countdown is on. It's 12:30 at night, and you've got the executives. Then you got Anheuser-Busch. That period of time, I can't imagine what Bill, what Scott, and what these investors were going through, because you had to cross your fingers, and they're still cabling and painting the walls as you're getting ready to say you're live. I mean, describe how you went on that kind of a play-by-play in the book.
Yeah, I mean, it started with that diary Bill kept, and then he said, "All right, we're going to publish this in 2026." We did a documentary which aired once on ESPN. It's available on a pay-per-view basis at this point, but we interviewed 22 key people. We said, we have these 22 great voices. Let's pull out perspectives, either about the moments that are talked about in the books, or something that shines a light on what does 1979 look like in 2026. And we interspersed these 20, everybody from Chris Berman to Bob Lee to early anchors like Greg Wyatt, two longtime presidents, George Bodenheimer and Jimmy Pitaro, a lot of people that came together, well-known to unofficial ESPN historian names, sprinkled them throughout. And then Bill had, after he launches ESPN, he's the great entrepreneur and innovator, and he does a lot of speeches. Went through a lot of speeches and media interviews and said, what has he learned? What did he talk about with entrepreneurship? And at the end of every chapter has several tips that he did on launching a business and what he learned. So it's not just a sports book. My wife, who's the least sports fan in America, loved the audiobook because it's an origin story that's exciting. There's a lot of drama in it. But it really tells an amazing story for people that like history, American history, that like origin stories.
It is an origin story. And kind of, I'll end a lot of the formal stuff with this question. At the end of each chapter, as you said, there are some lessons. For my listeners out there, what can entrepreneurs learn from all of Bill's leadership after reading this book?
We were originally going to call the book and the documentary Intentional Optimism, because Bill really stressed that. And he stretched that he had to be optimistic, that if a cable operator says, you're never going to launch, 24-hour sports is a bad idea, Bill didn't wallow in it. He's like, oh, that guy's wrong. I'm right. I'll move on to the next cable system. So that's what he did. And he brought that optimism. And even this day, 93 years old with Parkinson's, he talks about, he wakes up in the morning and says, all right, today's going to be a good day. That's the way to approach business. It's the way to approach life. And we get into that in the book.
It's a good book. Easy reach. It's perfect by the summer because, honestly, I mean, other than, I am a massive sports fan, as you could probably tell, baseball, whatever like that. This is the perfect time to actually get fired up for your football season while you're sitting by the pool. Before we let you go, listen, 45 plus years, PR, man, the spin jobs that you've had to do and everything. One story, maybe we don't know, that I don't know, that it just sticks out, funny, laugh. Can you share something?
Well, I love, and it's in the book, I love the idea that SportsCenter, which is the first show that ESPN ever airs, and obviously is a huge thing today. It's the most televised television show in history by far, because it's on so many times a day. Bill had done a time buy on a religious channel in Hartford, Connecticut, about 3 years before the launch. He was a frustrated former local news anchor that got us 3 minutes. And that was it. And that people want more. So he does a time buy for 30 minutes on a religious channel and launches a show called Sports Only, which was basically Sports Center for the Hartford market a few years earlier. And that's where Sports Center began. And he brings it onto a national platform. And so much of what ESPN later became, really the backbone of it, was Sports Center.
Just amazing. Just the career, the people you have met in the game, and you've turned it into a wonderful book, along with what you do as the official historian for ESPN. Again, it is called Sports Heaven: The Birth of ESPN, written by Mike Soltys and Garrett Sutton. If people are interested in this, where can they find it? Where can they buy it?
The book and the audiobook are easy to find. Amazon, Barnes and Noble, wherever you, if you're an Audible subscriber or any of the other premium, audiobook people, the audiobook's a terrific listen. And the documentary is available on a platform called Tenero.tv. But if you Google them, you can find them all, and they're all out now. The print book was the third of the three, and that just came out this week.
Well, to paraphrase an idle mind, everybody should get back to the bookstore and go buy one yourself.
A perfect plug for it. And Boomer he does the foreword, he does a couple of the perspectives, and then Bill Rasmussen got inducted into the Broadcasting Hall of Fame in December. He wasn't able to go to New York. Chris went to accept it. We run a copy of his remarks about Bill in the appendix of the book. So if you love Berman, and most ESPN fans do, you'll get a lot of them in this book.
That's my horrible Chris Berman.
That's not bad. That's not bad. And he's our longest running employee at this point. Started out that opening month and has been at it ever since, and hopes to be around for for the ESPN 50th celebration in 3 years.
Well, I'd like to say it wasn't my childhood, but it certainly has been around the second half of my life. It helped. It bring tons, and it continues to bring tons of pleasure to me, because all I do is turn it on. I wake up with it. I go to bed with it. So thank you and the entire ESPN, and Bill and Scott also, for coming up with this crazy idea that, kind of makes so many people happy.
Well, you're welcome, and thank you for enthusiastically talking about it. The fans that we have around the country is why the company's been so successful all these years. So thank you, Michael.
His name is Mike Soltys, the co-author of Sports Heaven: The Birth of ESPN. Go check it out just at some of those locations that Mike had said. If not, pop me a note and I'll tell you how to get it yourself. Mike, continued success, and we hope to talk to you soon.
Great. Thank you.
You got it. All right. Michael Garfield is the name. Oh, what could have been back in the day if they just accepted my VHS tape. All right. So I had to settle for QVC. What do I got? Now I'm doing radio. Life turned out for me, didn't it? It is the High-Tech Texan Show all over the world on iHeartRadio. Michael Garfield. Don't go anywhere. We're going to be right back.